Hey everyone, welcome back. And today we are diving into this absolutely wild true story, which is The Wager by David Grann. And let me tell you, when I picked this up, I was expecting like an adventurous historical read, but what I got was way more darker, more human, and honestly, way more thought-provoking. And how some of the books just pull you into another time and where you can, feel the cold wind, smell the salt in the air, and, hear the creak of the ship. But I mean, this book also does that, but it also shows you how brutal and, chaotic that world really was. And it's about a shipwreck, yes, but it's also about, the power, the class, the empire, and how far, people can go when, survival is at stake. And if you think you know what a naval adventure is, I mean, this book will blow that idea out of the water. So, yeah, let's first start off and let's talk about these press gangs back in the days. And those shady guys who literally uh, grabbed random men off the streets and forced them to join the Navy. And like the author Gran, paints such a vivid picture of what that really looked like. And these weren't, proud volunteers signing up for glory. These were people who, didn't have a choice. Basically, they were criminals, debtors, even, people just in the wrong place at the wrong time. And it's not just that the author, uh, David Grant, describes how, even injured veterans were hauled out of hospitals, like sometimes on stretchers even, and dumped into the ships. Like, it was horrifying. And like, imagine that, like, you have lost a leg or you are half blind, and suddenly you are, being told, like, congratulations, you are back in service. And yeah, it's sort of insane to think. And so, when you think about how was, actually manning these ships were like, it's not a band of heroes, like, it's a mix of desperate souls, broken men, and criminals also. Like they were all trapped together in a floating coffin of disease and misery. And that part, really hit me because it makes the later chaos feels more inevitable. And these men were already, living in a kind of a hell, like long before the shipwreck even, happened. So yeah, and like then on the other hand of the spectrum, we have got these upper class teenage boys, like literally 14 or 15 years old, and they were, joining the Navy as midshipmen. Uh, and the future officers, I had like no idea how young they were. These kids came from, good backgrounds, expected, and they were expected to become refined leaders, and they were supposed to learn fencing, Latin, math, drawing, and all that while sailing through storms and commanding men twice their age. And yeah, the author Gran also uses like John Byron as the perfect example in my opinion. Uh, and also, here's also a fun fact. He was also the grandfather of the poet Lord Byron. So, yeah, he's not well remembered today, but he actually had a long, successful naval career after surviving the Wager incident. So, yeah, and reading about him, you get this sense of like huge class divided about about these ships, right? So, for example, half of the crew are, ragged, half mad, uh, half mad men, pulled from prisons, and the other half are, these teenage aristocrats, like trying to act like a proper officers, which I found quite funny. And yeah, it's like this uh, power keg waiting to explode, you know. You can almost feel the tension, the resentment, the mistrust, the arrogance, and like all brewing even before, disaster is about to strike. So yeah, it's pretty fascinating if you think about it. And yeah, okay, now let's talk about the voyage itself. So in 1740, a squadron of British ships was set out, and their goal was to, chase this Spanish galleon and to, challenge the Spain's control of trade routes and, grab as much as silver and, gold as they can. And it's all part of, Britain's big imperial project, which is, expand, conquer, and, profit out of it. So but what's fascinating is how, Gran shows the reality behind that mission. The ships are, overcrowded, they were filthy, they were, disease-ridden, and they are, barely enough food to, and, clean water as well to provide for the people who are on board the ships, and they were, literally starving. Their teeth were falling out from, scurvy, disease, and bodies were also, covered in sores. And Grant doesn't, romanticize any of it. He describes it as this, the smell, the rot, and the filth, and it's not heroic at all. Like it's miserable, and like the journey itself becomes a slow motion, death march. And by the time the Voyager is sailing around this, Cape Horn, it's like Cape Horn is like one of the most dangerous stretches of ocean on the planet, and half of the crew is already sick, and the weather is pure chaos. So yeah, and then of course the inevitable, happens. The Voyager ship, wrecks off the coast of, I think it was Patagonia. Yeah, it was smashed by, storms, wind, and rocks, and it was like pure chaos at that point of time. And men are, thrown into the freezing sea. The ship breaks apart, and somehow, group of survivors manages to, crawl into this barren, windswept island, and there are no food, no shelter, and they have no idea where they are. And I feel like that's where the real story begins. And also, before I, get into this survival part, there's this one scene, I just have to mention it because it was so beautiful. David Grann wrote it so beautifully. It's the moment when, Commander Anson's ship, which was called the Centurion, it comes face to face with this massive Spanish galleon. And this part honestly reads like a reads like an action movie. It's intense, it's dramatic, and the cannons are, blasting everywhere. The waves are crashing, and if I'm remembering it right, it all happens during a stormy night, which just amplifies the drama itself. So yeah, it felt cinematic, like something you can see playing out in slow motion on the big screen. And yeah, the scene alone shows how well Gran blends a real history with the pacing of a thriller. And so yeah, let's come back on the island and where everything, starts to unravel. So at first, they try to, keep some kind of order, like a chain of command, discipline, structure. But yeah, pretty soon all of it like collapses. And, their captain, which was called Chief, tries to, hold authority, but his men are, starving and they were desperate. And then you have got this one character which was called Bulkley, who was a gunner, uh, who also, starts, questioning everything. Like, and soon enough, it's like uh, full out mutiny there. So the faction forms, the loyalty shifts, and people start turning on each other. And yeah, it's horrifying, but it's also fascinating. Like you see how quickly civilizations can break down when survival takes over. And yeah, there's theft also, betrayal, and even murder at some point of time. And yeah, some accounts even suggest cannibalism. So yeah, and Gran never glamorized it. He just lays it bare. The hunger, the madness, the moral collapse. And reading it, I caught myself thinking like, what would I have done here? Like, would I have followed orders of my captain, or I have joined the mutiny? Like it really makes you question what right and what wrong even means when you are starving and freezing to death. Like, yeah, that's quite fascinating. And then comes this unbelievable part where, months later, after everyone assumes the wager is gone, like for forever, and a small boat, like a makeshift sort of a boat, arrives in Brazil, and it's been like 283 days since the wreck, and where it started with like 81 men. Now only 30 skeletal survivors are, barely alive on it. And they have traveled more than like 3,000 miles, something through the storms, starvation, and madness. And you think like that's it, like the survivors made it. But no, like 6 months later, another small boat, washes up. But this time it washes up in Chile, or Chile, whatever you want to call it, with only three men left, like half mad, covered in bugs. They were delirious, barely human, and Grant's descriptions are so vivid, like you can almost see these ghost-like figures, staggering onto land after nearly a year of hell. So yeah, and also here's the twist, like when they finally get back to England, instead of like they being welcomed as heroes, they felt terrified, like because they know what's coming ahead of them, a trial basically. So yeah, they are facing charges of mutiny, murder, and even cannibalism. So yeah, each group blames the other. Like the captain says they did uh, the survivors, and the survivors on other hand, they say like he was a tyrant. Uh, like they were talking about the captain chief, and it all becomes like this intense public scandal. And what I love about how Graham handles it is that he never picks a side. He presents all the conflicting testimonies, the political maneuvering, and just lets you decide for yourself. Like it's like reading a true crime case from 1700s, and where every witness has something to hide. And you start realizing the real question isn't that what happened. It's like who controls the story, and whose version of the truth becomes like history. And that's what stuck with me the most, because yes, the wager is a survival story. Like it's got action, horror, and tragedy, but underneath all that, it's really about the truth. And it's about how people spin stories to survive, like not just physically but also socially. So yeah, and amidst all this, the British Empire wanted to look noble and civilized and, invincible as well. So yeah, this story exposed how quickly all that, fell apart once the masks were off. Uh, so when you like strip away the uniforms and the ranks, and, you know, everyone's everyone's just human at the end of the day. They are terrified, they are hungry, and they are flawed as well. So it also reminded me how, history itself works. Like, we like to think, truth always wins out, but like more often it's whoever has the, louder voice or has the better story, in my opinion. And in a way, that's what, David Grann, captures perfectly. Like, how even in disaster, humans are, still fighting for, control, not just over survival, but also over the narrative as well. So, yeah, one thing I also want to, talk about before closing out is, how gorgeous this book is. Like, it's filled with illustrations, portraits, and maps that really help you visualize the world. And yeah, these are paintings of, actual ships, sketches of the survivors, maps of their impossible routes, and even the diagram showing how amputations were done back then, which is quite horrifying as it sounds. So yeah, it feels more immersive, like you are flipping through a historical archive than reading just a novel, in my opinion. So yeah, this was Wager by David Grann. Like, it's an absolute incredible mix of, history, adventure, and moral complexity, in my opinion. And I found it, quite brutal, thought-provoking, and totally unforgettable. Like, yeah. Also, if you are not into non-fiction like I was, please, give this book a try, and I bet you will like it. Like, it was that good. I was not into non-fiction, especially history, but yeah, this book, I loved it. And yeah, also, if you have read it, I would like to know what part, shocked you the most. Was it the mutiny, the trial, or the insane battle that occurred between, Centurion and the galleon? So drop your comments down in the comments section and hit like if you enjoyed this breakdown, and I will see you in the next one. Oh, and one more thing. I've also finished uh, two another books. One I have read. It's called it's called Too Old for This by Samantha Downing, and the other one I finished is You Are Not Supposed to Die by Galen Barron. Uh, yeah, both of them are thrillers. This one is more like campy slasher sort of a book. And yeah, I'll be coming out with the reviews of those two books as well. So yeah, please subscribe and like the video. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.